We're starting a new series called Under Construction. Nothing's broken here yet. But Margie came up to me. Margie takes care of our building. She does an amazing job. In fact, we should give it up for Margie right now, just because she does such an awesome job. One day I'm going to call you up. All right. But Margie came up to me after service, and she says, "What are you doing? I made this place so nice and clean, and look at what you did." So, yeah, I'm sorry. But we are in our new series called Under Construction. I'm going to read this, 1 Peter 2, 1 through 5, right away, just to kind of give us the backdrop. This will be the foundation of this whole series over this month. And so I just want to read this, starting at verse 1. "So get rid of all evil behavior. Be done with all deceit, hypocrisy, jealousy, and all unkind speech. Like newborn babies, you must crave pure milk so that you will grow into a full experience of salvation. Cry out for this nourishment now that you have had a taste of the Lord's kindness." And right here, verse 4, and this is kind of where it builds in. Verse 4, you are coming to Christ, you are coming to Christ, who is the living cornerstone of God's temple. He was rejected by the people, but he was chosen by God for great honor. Verse 5, and you are living stones that God is building into his spiritual temple. Once more, you are his holy priests. Through the mediation of Jesus Christ, you offer spiritual sacrifices that please God. Lord, I pray that you would just speak to us through your words and help us to hear your voice clearly in Jesus' mighty name. And the church said, amen. Well, look, in construction, whenever there's a building project or any kind of project, who's ever done a project in your home ever? Lift up a hand if that's you. Ever. You've done a project or you've hired somebody to. How many of you know that maybe not the first stage would be the planning, the dreaming, right? And we all have dreams, we all have plans, we all have an idea of what we want. But how many of you know when it's time to start work, and I'm going to give a shout out, Adam just been working hard. He just put a beautiful house online that he'd been working so hard on, and he knows all about that. I know Ryan Styron here, he knows about construction. At the end of the day, one of the first steps of any project is what? It's demo day, right? It's demo day, and you need the right tools. I'm not going to break anything right now, but man, when I have this in my hand, I'll tell you, all of a sudden, I just want to start like breaking things. Like it just. I need to put it down. Okay, so look, I've been there. I've done the projects, and at the end of the day, demo day is both a very hard season and a hard day, but it's also a very rewarding one. Oftentimes, when you get done with that demolition and you look and you see the blank canvas in front of you, you can begin to start to see your dreams start taking place in front of you. And I think spiritually, this is very much true as well, that there are some things that if God's going to do the things that he's dreaming through you, and I believe that even as a church, he's dreaming through us as a leadership team, there are some things that we need to look at and say, okay, what in our lives do we need to demolish and get rid of so that we would have a blank canvas for God to build what he wants to build through our lives? And today I wanted to start this series on the concept of demo and demo day for the things in our lives that aren't of God that he wants to get rid of for us so that we may be able to move forward in the calling that he has for us. How many of you would say, if you're honest, you would just say, I want what God has for my life? Anybody? There's all over the room. Now, if you're saying, I don't care and I don't want, just stay with me. And maybe by the end, you might change that tune. But I think most of us in this place, maybe even all of us would say, I want what God has for me. But how many of you know that there are some walls that get in the way of that? There are some things that stop that and hinder that. And how many of you have ever been a speed bump person? You hate the speed bumps and you try to hit them as hard as you can. Anybody like that? Everybody is different, but we hit speed bumps, we hit walls, we hit these barriers. And those walls could be a lot of different things. It could be a situation. Maybe somebody hurt you. Maybe you're dealing with some pain, some baggage. Maybe there's something that, and it might be something your whole life you've been struggling with. There may be things like relational issues. There may be things like sin in your life. And sin is very much just anything that isn't of God that is keeping you from what God has for your life. It's God has a target for you, and if you're off target because of some habits and some things in your life, those are sins, and those are things that are walls in your life that will keep you from being able to move into what God has for your life. My heart for you, my desire for you as individuals, as a church, and as a family is that we would see these walls in our lives start to come down so that we'd be able to walk in the freedom that God has for us. I would say right now, everybody in this room who raised their hand and said, I want what God has for me, can also raise their hand and say, but I have this thing that's slowing me down, that's in the way. And you can name it. Most of us, we can name it. But God is building something. How many of you know God's building you? I just read it. He's the cornerstone. He was the stone that the other builders rejected, but yet he is now our God and our King, raised to life, and he is building us into a spiritual temple. He's building you. He's doing something in you. And the only thing that will stop the progress is you. It's you. And so today, my heart and my challenge for us is to learn to pick up the hammer, the tools that we need, maybe the sawzall, if our hammer gets taken away from us. And we start to tear down some of these things in our lives that have been keeping us from what God has. Church, I'm not telling you that you need to stand up and declare everything that you're doing wrong. It's between you and the Lord. But in your heart, you know that there are some things that if in 2024 you're going to see breakthrough, you need to see these things come down. And so I'm going to start with a very common story, one that we all know very well, many of us know very well. And I'm going to dig into it. It's out of Joshua 2, and I'm going to set it up. You know, the Israelites, God had moved them out of Egypt, and they went through the Red Sea on dry ground. Then they went over the Jordan River on dry ground. God was doing something amazing with the people. And he was starting fresh with a new group of people. 40 years in the desert, it was a new generation that had raised up, and he had a new generation. He had a new purpose. He had everything planned. He had a new land ahead of them, and it wasn't going to be easy. How many know any demo project? Any project is not easy, right? If you want to do an easy project, just change your doorknobs, and even that might not be easy. Because there's these things called hiccups and problems and things that we didn't expect whenever there's a project. Anybody ever do that? I was tearing out floor one day. Lo and behold, everything underneath that floor was like not able to hold anything. Guess what? That was a hiccup. And we experience hiccups all the time in our lives. We go through different things. And the Israelites, it was no different. They had to go into this new land that God was calling them to, and they experienced a hiccup. The hiccup was called Jericho. At the time, it was the most fortified city there was. There was no getting into it without going through the doors. And guess what? They weren't welcome. And so we pick up, I'm going to read a couple places, we look at this story, and I just want to give you an idea. The walls of Jericho were so big that the people lived in the walls. Their houses were in the walls. That's how big the walls were. So I just want to get some perspective on this. And we know this because, and I'm going to start reading right here, because we know that Rahab lived in one of the homes that was in the wall. And so I'm going to pick up Joshua 2, and we're going to start in verse 15. I'm going to be skipping around a lot, so please follow along, but I'll have the verses up there. But Joshua 2, verse 15. Then since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window, escaped to the hill country. She told them, hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then when they have returned, you can go on your way. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about what was happening. In order to try to figure out if there were, any weaknesses, any things that they needed to know about the land, they sent spies in. And so some spies went ahead and they were checking things out. And when they got to Jericho, they got in there and they actually found themselves in the safe harbor of Rahab's house. Now, there were a couple things about Rahab. Rahab probably was, she was told to us in scriptures that she was a prostitute, but she probably did housing as well. So there were homes that people could rent and things like that. And so they went to Rahab to find a place to stay. And so while they were there, they found themselves being sought after, that they heard the townsmen of Jericho realized that there were some spies, so they were searching for them. And here Rahab, realizing who they were, actually protected them and hid them up in the roof and hid them. And then after the coast was clear, got them and said, okay, I'm going to let you down through the side wall. You can get out down this rope. And then she says this, but please, can you remember me? Remember me, remember our family. And I love that she, and it says this, and I'm not reading all of it because it's a lot of a story, and so I'm going to just say this. She said to them something very similar to this. She said, I've heard about what God did through you, through your people, that you walked across the dry ground and over the Red Sea, that you walked through the Jordan. We know what we've heard, and I believe what God has done. And when you come and when you take over, remember me. And there's something amazing about that just by what she heard about God, she was able to start believing that God was going to do something there. Now we're going to skip over to Joshua 6. In setting this up, this is the angel of the Lord, which was Jesus, we believe, and pre-incarnate Jesus, who's speaking to Joshua here. And he says this in verse 6, now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because of the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go in or out. And then verse here, right here, but the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all of its strong warriors. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark and each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can, then the walls of the town will collapse and the people can charge straight into the town. I'm going to skip down to verse 15. On the 7th day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town as they had done before. But this time, everybody say, but this time, they went around the town 7 times. The 7th time around, as the priests sounded a long blast on their horns, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the town. Verse 17, Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and the others in her house will be separate, or will be spared, for she protected our spies. I'm going to skip down again to verse 24. Then the Israelites burned the town and everything in it. Only the things made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron were kept for the treasury of the Lord's house. So Joshua spared Rahab, the prostitute, and her relatives who were in her house because she had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho. And she lives among the Israelites today. God, speak to us, Lord. How many of you know if you are going to start doing a demo project, the one thing you need besides a hammer is some power? We can see those things come down. How many of you would say, that thing I thought about earlier, that thing that I know has been keeping me from what God has for me, how many of you would say right now, I'm believing that God can tear that thing down? Is there anybody who wants to believe that with me? Okay, so here's what we've got. Because we believe that, because we can see the possibility of it, we've got our plan. Like we've got an idea of we've got like the vision of what that demo project's gonna look like. We've got an idea of what that project's gonna look. I don't know exactly what God's gonna do for me, but I know if I can get this thing out of the way, I know I can see more clearly of what God has for me. And so here's the deal. The first step is we need to look at demoing what it is that's keeping us from what God has. And so the first step that we see in Scripture as we looked at this story was God said, I want to see these priests go around one time, and who's leading? The priests are leading, then the presence of God, and they're going to be blowing horns. And look, this is all symbolic of one thing: worship. It's all symbolic of worship and prayer. That when the priests are leading, when they're going, and this is the cool thing, we are called royal priests now. Did you know that? If you've accepted Jesus, you are in the priesthood of Christ. We are co-heirs with Christ. I don't think we give enough power, enough credence or enough respect to the power of worship and prayer. I think that we lose it. It's like an afterthought. Like, I'm going to come to church and I'm going to worship at church because the music's good and I like it. Or maybe I'm going to come to church and I don't worship because I don't like the music. Or maybe I'm going to come to church and that's when I'm going to pray. I'll take some time with God then. Or if things get bad, that's when I'm going to talk to God. But can I just tell you something right now? You have a sledgehammer in your arsenal and a sawzall in your arsenal that will tear down so many walls in your life. And it's called worship and it's called prayer. And if you're not using it, if you're not praying, if you're not spending time in worship in the car or maybe at home when you're alone or when you're working on something, like if you're not worshiping God, if you're not taking that time, you are missing out on some of the greatest tools of power that God has for you. You want to see the walls come down, the first step is prayer and worship. You've got to start going to God and saying, God, I'm going to intercede and I'm going to pray and I'm going to get close to you. Look, this 40 days of fasting is not just us giving up something in the walls and the speed bumps and the things in your life, the things that are in front of you that are keeping you from what God has for you. You've got to go into 2024 with an attitude of, I'm going to worship and I'm going to pray and I'm going to make that a priority every single day. Now, I'm not telling you you won't see any breakthrough without prayer and you won't see any breakthrough without worship. I'm not telling you that you won't see that. I'm saying you will see it if you are in worship and prayer. You might see it if you're just, hey, God, waiting on you to do everything. But the Lord wants us. Look, the walls would not have come down if they didn't listen to God. And the walls would not have come down if they didn't lead with worship and pray and believe. In fact, the first, at the beginning when they went around, it was completely silent. They didn't yell, they didn't say anything. They just let the worship music go. Church, you want to see breakthrough. I think most of us in the room raised our hand. We want to see what God has. I want God to use me. I want that to happen. The question is, you may want to see it, but are you willing to put in the work? To get it done. How many of you ever seen a project in your house finished and beautiful and you didn't do anything? Now look, some of y'all would say, well, that's me. I paid for somebody to do it. Yes, you paid them. You did something. There was a cost. How many of you know you want to see a project done? There's a cost to the pleasure of that project. Anybody with me on that? Either you're paying it with money or you're paying it with sweat equity, but there is a cost that goes into the project fulfilled that you want to see. God is working something in you. He is building something in you. And the only roadblock is you. Because he wants to partner with you in this thing called life and do it with you. And your part in this is there's three things. You've got to be in prayer, you've got to be in worship, and you've got to be in the word. Know who he is. And then there's this other word that is called holiness. Because all in all, when God links with us and we do life together with God, it's a partnership, right? And there's power. It means you're set apart. You're different. You're saying, God, I may not be perfect, but I'm going to be set apart for you. I'm going to be different for you. I'm going to be yours. And I might mess up and I might make mistakes, but I'm yours. Holiness. In fact, the reason why Jericho was destroyed and everything in it completely demolished was because they were so wicked. They were so wicked. And I'm going to say this, that if we don't partner with God, listen, in time, God will deal with the things in our lives that aren't holy. And let me just tell you, I would rather surrender it to God and work on it than to wait, do nothing, and later down the road have to deal with the consequences. I think of it's not even in my notes, but I think of Samson, right? Samson just kept not dealing with his issues. And over again, he kept not dealing with them. And he got himself deeper and deeper into mess. Until finally God says, fine, you want to do it on your own? Let me take my hand off of you. Now you do it on your own. Whatever you want to do. And I started praying this prayer a while ago, probably about 2 years ago. I started praying, God, if there are things that aren't of you that need to be taken out, will you deal with it and take it out? And sometimes that pruning that he does hurts. Sometimes it's difficult. But now looking back over the last 2 years and where we are now, I say, God, thank you. Thank you for every moment of pruning. Thank you for everything that you've shown us so that we might be closer to you now. See, our God is good and he loves you. He loves you so much. He has good things for you. I think about that partnership and the idea of holiness. And I'm just going to say this, guys. You've got to break the things that are not right in you. You've got to. I think about the I don't know if you've seen the movie Fireproof, but my favorite part of that movie, if you haven't seen it, it's a good relational type movie, but the husband had been dealing with some stuff, and it was keeping him from a healthy relationship with his wife and a healthy relationship with God. And so there's this beautiful scene where you see him taking his computer and he puts it in the trash, and then he takes a sledgehammer to it and gets rid of it. It's done. It's gone. There's no going back. I think back on my life at some pivotal moments that I think if I didn't listen to God on this, I wouldn't be where I am now. I would not be your pastor if I didn't listen to God on these small things years and years ago. Let me give you 3 examples very fast. I'm not going to go into the details of the story, but I'm going to give you 3 examples. 1, when I got saved, my room was filled with demonic stuff. I was into witchcraft. I was a mess. I was so hurting and angry and longing for some kind of belonging that my room was covered in just demonic stuff. And so when I got saved, I remember sitting in my room that night, and God spoke to me and said, "You need to clean this out." And 4 garbage bags later, full, like black full garbage bags packed out later, my room was an empty canvas. That was a demo day for me. I had to demo some stuff, right? And you might have some stuff you have to demo. I remember a few years later, I'm in high school. I just started driving. Praise the Lord. That was a great time. It was so much fun. 16 years old. Just had my license. And you know what I love to do? I had an old car I was driving. It was my mom's. We shared it. And I remember I had set it all up for amazing music. All right? Yeah, I did. We had these kids. We had these things called CDs. I don't know if you know what those are, but they're like DVDs, right? You remember those. They're like DVDs, but they were music on them. And usually you had about 12 songs. And then sometimes, if you're lucky, at the end, just listen to the last song. Just let it keep going for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then there was a hidden track on there. This is beauty, the beauty of CDs that y'all don't know anything about. And here's the deal. Before that, there were these things called cassette tapes, right? Some of you, if you find a car old enough, you might actually find a cassette tape, and that's what I had. I had a cassette tape radio, and that's all I had, but I had to figure out how to do the CDs on the cassette, so I had the adapter that you put in the tape, but it had a wire coming out, and then it went to the little Walkman, the little Discman. Come on now, y'all remember the Discman? And then I had in the back, I had my big old case of all my CDs, right? And it was like a book. I mean, just you had to, and so while driving, 16 years old, I'm sitting here, I'm going through CDs, driving, trying to put in the CD, get that, and then I'm going, don't do that. Y'all, don't do that. Music, all that stuff, it was really great, good, godly music. And then I had the other section. Anybody of you have another section of something in your life? Come on. It's in the back. And I remember driving around town, I wanted to be cool, and I listened to what was cool. And I liked certain types of music. And so I'm not going to lie, and I'm not going to condone it. This isn't I'm not giving an advocation of anything. I'm just saying this is where I was. I had my Tupac and Dr. Dre blasting as loud as I could down the road, and that was me, 16 years old. All right? I was a mess, and I'm driving, and then look, I had to turn on the road that the church was on. It had like a little bit of a turn, and I remember by the time I hit that turn, I need to make sure that I'm not blasting the Tupac, right? Because there's a lot of words that would not be okay at church. Now listen, I knew Jesus. I was a Christian. I loved the Lord. But he was working on some stuff. I had a Jericho wall that I had to take down, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't even realize it. And so I found myself switching as fast as I could, knee on the steering wheel. I'm taking out and switching in, and I'm putting in I went from Tupac to, then I popped in the Sonic Flood, and then I'm like, so I went from Tupac to I want to know you, and I'm just driving, I want to hear, and it's loud, and everybody all my friends at church, oh, there's Dustin with his car and his loud music, blasting the worship. And God spoke to me in that parking lot before I got out of the car. And he said, I could hear him. He said, man, if you are as committed to me as you are to playing a double life, I think we can get somewhere. And I just said, well, what do you want me to do? And he says, I need you to get rid of it. And I remember in the parking lot, by this time, everybody had gone into service, and God was just dealing with me. I'm sitting there with that binder, and CDs were expensive, especially when you don't have that much money. And I remember God saying, you got to get rid of it. I said, well, who do you want me to give it to? He says, no. You need to get rid of it. CDs break pretty easy when you snap them. I learned that. And I broke maybe 60 CDs that day in the parking lot of my church. And then I took the next year and I only listened to worship music for a year. Not even Christian music that wasn't worship. It changed my life that season. I don't know that I'd be here if I wasn't faithful in those things. Not long later, there was another same kind of situation, only it was video games. Uh-oh. Pastor Dustin talking about video games. That wasn't a bad thing in the sense that the video game itself wasn't bad like the CDs were. That was a time thing. I don't know what happened to maybe a week of my life because of the video game that I was playing. Because I just started, and then the next thing I knew, I had to sleep a little bit, and then I went back to playing the game. And before I knew it, I just lost all that time. On what? On nothing. And God said that to me. What are you doing with yourself? I've got so much more for you, and you're wasting all this time on nothing. Again, I had to take out the CD, and I broke it. That one, God was speaking so loudly to me. We lived on the second floor of an apartment complex, and God said, I need you to get rid of it and just get it out of the house. So what did I do? I broke it, and I tossed it out the window into the woods. We lived, there were woods there right there. It wasn't just, I'm not okay. You can't litter. I get it. Don't email me, okay? I know. Church, there's power in partnering with God. And there's power in being consistent. Those guys it was hard. And they kept showing up, and maybe you won't see the breakthrough tomorrow, and maybe you won't the next day, and maybe it'll be 7 days, maybe it'll be 7 years. But look, if you consistently say, God, I'm going to worship, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to worship, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to stay close to you, and I'm going to live my life as holy as I can, set apart for you, and I'm going to just keep faithful, I believe that you're going to do something powerful. There's power in being persistent. There's power in being close to God and his partnership, and then there's power in perspective as the band comes up. There's power when we have the right perspective. 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18 says this. This is why we never give up. Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed every day. Amen? For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them and will last forever. So we don't look at the troubles we can see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on the things that we cannot see. For the things we see now will be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. So let me ask you something. Yes, you're struggling. Yes, there's a difficulty. Yes, there's a pothole. Yes, there's a wall. Listen. Don't you realize that these troubles, they're only temporary? And that if we can fix our eyes on God, like what we've been hearing this whole service, fix our eyes on God, then we will see in time that what he develops in us in the troubles and the difficulties will give us an everlasting growth. So look, if things are hard, if things are difficult, maybe there's some things that you need to demo. There's some walls that need to come down. It is so important that we're able to say, God, you're bigger than this. You're greater than this. And I'm going to be faithful to you even in the midst of it. Listen, don't move into the house in the wall and live there comfortably. Don't live in the wall. Don't give up on the fact that God's going to tear it down. Some of you have been struggling with some stuff so long that you've given up working on it. Don't live there. Don't live there. I think about Rahab, and I go back to that part of the story with Rahab. And she says, and do it again. Hebrews 11, verse 30. It was by faith that the people of Israel marched around Jericho for 7 days, and the walls came crashing down. And then verse 31, I love this. It was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed with the people of her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Here's what I'm trying to say, and just so you know, in the genealogy of Jesus, you see Rahab's name pop up right in the middle of it. That Rahab was part of the line of Jesus, this prostitute who was hopeless and in a hopeless city that was going to burn. And yet, because she said, I'm going to be set apart, she was spared, and not just spared, but given purpose. Right now, you might be in this room, and maybe at the beginning of it, you might have said, I don't God. Or maybe you said, I don't really know if I need what he has for me. If that's you, I'll tell you right now, there is no better life than a life you can live for Jesus. He has so many amazing things for you. So many beautiful things. But like Rahab, you have to make a choice. You have to choose, am I going to set myself apart and be different, or am I just going to do the same thing? Today, are you willing to give your heart to Jesus, if that's you? I'm going to ask you, church, if you would stand up. We're going to sing the song in a moment, but until we do, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Number 1, are you in this room right now and you would say, Pastor Dustin, I want what God has for me, but there's been hurdles. There's a wall. There's something that's been keeping me. And today, I'm willing to begin the process or continue the process of doing the work, taking out the sledgehammer, breaking the things, getting rid of the things, doing the things that I need to do in order to see that wall come down. Is there anyone here who would say, that's me. I love God. I want what he has for me, but I need to put in the work. And today I'm willing to do that. All around the room, there have been hands up. Now I'm going to ask you this, with everyone's eyes closed and their heads bound, out of respect, I'm going to ask one question. Maybe you haven't even started this journey with Jesus and you don't know him, but like Rahab, you want to be set apart for God and saved by him. If that's you, would you raise your hand right now? Only I can see you. I see you back there. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else in the room that would say, I want to give my life to Jesus today? I see you right there. Is there anyone else in the room? One more second. If you did raise your hand, we're going to pray a prayer together, and I'm going to ask you to pray it out loud with us. We're all going to pray that are in front of me. Help me to be set apart for you and different. I give you my life. And I want to follow you the rest of my days. Set my eyes on you, Jesus. In Jesus' name.